Fortbase is part of a generation of tools. It's really built to make cybersecurity easier. I'm just realizing, Jonathan, that lava lamp is on brand. It's like that orange glow color that your marketing department gave us is like.
Oh yeah, that's all by design.
It's all. Welcome back to the MSB Cyber Roundtable, everyone. We've got Johnathan Schofield here from ChannelFalcon and also Dark Horse Business Systems. We'll hear more about both of those in a minute. And today's topic of the day, of course, is economy of trust. We're going to do this part 2 because we did part 1 on Jonathan's channel last week, right?
That's right.
Of growing your channel with trusted advisors. Before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about Johnathan. So, ChannelFalcon's a new adventure for you. Let's fill in the blank, like everywhere up to that adventure before that adventure started, because we're going to talk about ChannelFalcon later. How did you jump in here to industry? How did you end up where you are?
Okay, so I've been in technology sales and business development pretty much my entire career. If selling phone, cable, and internet for Charter Cable, now Spectrum, if that counts, in a call center when I was 17. Over the course of the years, I was in a couple different industries, but most notably before the IT services channel, I consider it channel adjacent. I ran business development teams in the ERP channel. So I worked very closely with a couple different ISVs and ERP resellers to basically facilitate introductions for integrations, e-commerce, warehouse management, those types of things. Then that was going really, really well.
Oh, wait, slow down there. So this is I'm passionate about this because I had an early career moment there too, working with ERPs, manufacturing.
Yeah.
Tell me a story. So how long did you spend in that space?
6 years, I think. 6 years. Yeah. So it was with 2 different companies. One was an ISV that integrated e-commerce customer service portals with Sage, Microsoft Dynamics. Of course, back then it was Mass 90 and AX and Great Plains, depending on who you asked. It was kind of during the transition in those products, Microsoft taking over and Sage taking over the Mass 90 products. We also integrated with a handful of others throughout the years. Acumatica was a new one coming on the scene. Of course, there's the NetSuites and the Oracles that we were very much aware of, and the Infors and some of the other bigger guys, Epicor and whatnot. But I did that for a good long while. And then I transitioned to a warehouse management application, and I ran their business development.
This is like guys running around on forklifts, like grabbing stuff off shelves, like scanning inventory, like doing pick list tickets and stuff like that. Like that was your world.
100%, absolutely.
I sort of miss that world a little bit. I gotta say, I don't miss the corrugate dust, the dust that just cakes on everything in a warehouse. I don't miss that.
I was fortunate that I did most of my stuff over the phone and remotely and at events and whatnot. But I was talking to those guys that were in the trenches, primarily like the CPA or the CFOs and the controllers and the guys that really interface with the ERP most often and the manufacturing side of things. But I did get to to see some warehouses and do some cool things.
So that moment in my career when I had that experience, that was really my introduction to security. And I didn't know it at the time, but I know it now. Now that I've learned a lot about security, because security for a manufacturing business is all about availability.
True.
If your printers are down, like that might not sound like a big deal, but like that might mean that like you can't like print out some ticket that's part of a process that end result is you're shipping product out the door. And
Right.
manufacturing businesses typically are run on capital investments in manufacturing facilities.
Mm.
And when that facility is down, you lose money and you never make it back. You
That's
don't
right.
catch up tomorrow. It's gone forever.
Mm.
And so when you're down an hour, that might be like $100,000 or $1 million if you're down an hour. And from a security perspective, like super, super important today. So I'm always thinking about those moments. And so I'm getting lost in that story because
I didn't know we had that in common, Matt. That's awesome.
all right. So you were doing ERPs, you went into logistics, and then somehow you ended
Then
up back.
Well, COVID happened, and there was that, that apocalypse a couple of years ago. And the company I was working for at the time, great people, great product, but they made some tough decisions. They let me and my entire business development team go and then some. So I hit the ground running in the middle of the pandemic, looking for work, and no one was hiring. So I said, you know what? What better time than now to start a business? So Dark Horse Business Systems started. I didn't even know what an MSP was at the time. I got connected with my first, and I'm still working with these guys today. They're a really awesome client, but it's a cybersecurity product in the space. If I mention them, y'all probably know the name. But at the time, they were like, "We built this product for MSPs. Can you help us get it in front of more MSPs?" And I said, "Maybe." Quick question: what is that? What's an MSP? And he laughed, and I laughed, and I said, "Yeah, no, but seriously." And that was the first domino in a series of dominoes over the last several years. It was absolute privileged. I've worked with in cloud services. I've worked with different SaaS security vendors, and now I'll tell you more about it later. But I work almost exclusively with IT providers now, doing some really cool stuff. So,
All right. So thanks for that. I see you're drinking tea. What's your flavor?
hibiscus and something or other. I just kind of grabbed it from the cupboard. I don't know. It's like a deep purpley red color. It's good.
All right. It's not quite as good as that beer I was hoping for in like an
I mean,
hour, but
don't tip me, man. I mean, it is about that time on a Friday on the East Coast over here. It's almost 3 on the East Coast. Give us a break.
All right. We're gonna jump into lecture. So today we're gonna get super geeky, and I'm just gonna jump right in. We're talking about side channel attacks. So here it is. All right, that went in loop there. Side channel attacks. Right before the show, Jonathan's like, "So can you define exactly what a side channel attack is?" I got to practice my slide, but here's the slide, guys. So a side channel attack is an attack that's based on information that an attacker gathers from the way security is implemented rather than a flaw in the security design. So in theory, something's 100% secure, but when it comes to the real world, practical real world, nothing's 100% secure. And so those information channels may be secure, or then you may think they're secure, but there may be a way around to get at that information. So I'm gonna talk about some specific types of side channel attacks. I also want to talk about, just real quick, and we'll touch on it a different day, covert channels. So side channels are accidental flaws. Like I was designing a system to be secure, but accidentally I enabled an attacker to take advantage of it. There's also this thing, covert channels use all the same methods as a side channel, but people can actually establish channels into a secure facility. This is like in the spy world, right? Using those same technical methods to like work around security. It's just slightly different because a covert channel is something that you've intentionally created and you're hiding it. whereas a side channel is like not an intended outcome. So Tor, like that secure network over the internet, that's a covert channel. A side channel, we'll get into that right now. So you've got the secure communication. Usually it's a communication channel that goes from one place to another. And then someplace in that channel, there's a weakness that an attacker can gather information, draw conclusions about what's in that secure channel. So let's just talk about some examples real quick. There's several classes of side channel attacks, but I just want to make it gritty and real for a second. I'm going to talk about cache attacks real quick. So a cache attack is when an attacker doesn't necessarily have access to what's in a cache, but they can somehow infer what might be inside the cache by how someone accesses it. So there was these Intel bugs, these CPU bugs from a few years back that were a big deal in the security industry. Meltdown and Spectre. There were workarounds to try to make computers less vulnerable to Spectre and Meltdown. But to really fix the problem, it required Intel to redesign their actual CPUs that were in like every Intel computer. In the meantime, while we were trying to work around those issues, the whole industry slowed down computers by like 20% just to work around this issue. So everyone's computer in the world got 20% slower because of this bug around tracking cache. So that was a cache attack. These are my favorite electromagnetic attacks. Sometimes we call these emanation attacks, but it's an attack based on leaked electromagnetic radiation. Now, when magnetic radiation leaves where it's supposed to be and goes someplace else, that leakage is called an emanation. It can be detected. So let's talk about two versions of that. One I related to Johnathan is a tempest attack. So a tempest attack is when you've got an antenna to literally pick up what's going on inside a computer system from afar, right? Like monitoring what's happening in someone's computer from across the room. Or believe it or not, guys, back in the 80s, there were vans driving around the world that could pick up what was on people's computer screens from down the block because or on their TVs, closed caption television, because the CRT monitors we used in those days had these things on the back that connect to the computer with a bunch of wires inside that we thought were cables, but also happened to be antennas. And they beamed everything that was on the screen down the block, and you could just in the van dial in and look on what's in someone's screen. There's also tempest attacks where this still exists, even though we don't use CRT monitors anymore. You can take a sensitive antenna and you can point it at someone's device, and you can read data as it's flowing over the bus between the memory chips and the CPU. Sometimes you can get information about what's going on in the CPU, and usually people use those methods, which are quite sophisticated and difficult, but are actually happening in the real world all the time. This is like a tailored access thing that state actors are using to steal encryption keys. So when you see in the movies that spy with that magical device, that little box that they like hide next to some other computer to like suck the data out magically from inside, that's actually a real thing, guys. It's called a tempest attack. But it's not, as far as I know, the boxes aren't this big. It is like a giant rig, but it's a real thing. There's another electromagnetic attack called EU clique. All the fun attacks these days get names. EU clique was a weakness found in Infineon chipset. Infineon's a company that makes specialized microcontrollers for data processing. And these Infineon chips are used in high security devices. They're used in YubiKeys, encryption keys, FIDO devices from FITAN and YubiKey. They're also used in trusted platform modules, which are like the encryption chips in our laptops and servers that encrypt the hard drives. and some people found out that actually it was possible to with some electromagnetic antennas detect enough information about what was happening inside that chip using an antenna. Now you have to be really close to those chips, but to detect, and extract the secret key. And in the real world, what this means is these chips are often used to secure encryption keys. These encryption keys, um, I actually have some on my. These are vulnerable, by the way, because the only fix is to make a new key. They're used to secure computers, and you can steal it out of someone's pocket, take their smart card off of them that they're using to get into that DoD facility. Attackers can real quick do their like magic of stealing the key, return it back to the person who had the key. And you see this in the movies too, right? Like steal the key and clone it, and like 30 minutes get it back into the guy's pocket, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Anyway, that's another side channel attack. Um, there's a couple others here. I'm going to skip over the Rowhammer one, or at least not talk about it in depth. But there was an attack where you couldn't necessarily read what was in secured memory in a computer, but if you could get next to it in the RAM chip, like in the next address over, and you just slammed it enough times, you would like force the adjacent memory to like bit to flip. So that's Rowhammer. And then I do want to talk about data remnants. Big deal in InfoSec is like what happens to our data when we think we've destroyed it. Um, undelete has been around a long time, right? You can delete data off the hard drive, and most of the time it's not really gone. It's just marked for deletion. It looks like it's gone on the system, but someone can go in there and recover it, right? That's the reason why we encrypt disks these days. Is so when something's deleted, it's really gone. We destroy those encryption keys. Um, but there's a type of data remnants attack called a cold boot attack, which is sort of fun from a theoretical perspective. Um, so most of us in the tech world know that if you remove power from a computer, everything stored in memory in the RAM of the computer, it gets erased. In the real world, however, it's not quite so perfect. So most of us think if we restart our computer or we turn our computer off, that memory is gone. And our computers are usually protected by passwords, right? And theoretically, you could break into a computer without the password if you boot onto like let's say you take the disk out of the computer, you boot up and then you read the access on the disk. You could read the information on the disk, even though we don't have the password to get into the computer. And the way we protect from that is we encrypt. We encrypt the disk.
Hmm.
Now, for that to work, when you boot up your computer, you type in your password, and then the hard drive unlocks, and it stays unlocked as long as your computer's on. Most of us don't turn our computers off. We put them in sleep or we close the lid. They're not really asleep. And if you open them up again, you'll find that actually your computer is running in the background. It's accessing the disk, but you just can't get into the screen without typing the password. However, there's this thing called a cold boot attack where this like sounds sort of crazy, but if you remove the power from the RAM chips, the data actually takes like 10, 20, 30 seconds, 40 seconds to be erased. What happens is the voltage slowly leaks out of the RAM chips and eventually they lose their state and everything falls to zero. But if you and this is going to sound like it's an impossible attack, but this is a real thing that happens in the real world. If you either reboot the system really quickly and then boot up on another disk, you can quick grab those keys out of RAM. Or, and this is the crazy version of it, if you take liquid nitrogen and you spray it on the RAM chips, like, or pour it on the RAM chips, they stay cold. That's why it's called a cold boot attack, or one of the reasons why. We think it's a cold boot, but actually, you can preserve the encryption keys in that RAM chip. You can extract it, or even extract the same whole board. You can keep it in liquid nitrogen. You can move it someplace else, connect some probes onto the chip, and then like suck out all of the data. Um, and then you get the encryption key, and then you can take the encryption key and unlock the hard drive. And that's a real world attack that actually happens. Um, that would be something you'd do with a tailored access team. Like there's a red team that like knows how to do that stuff. But these people actually exist. I know some of them, and I've never had the pleasure to do one of those, but they're fun to read about. Now, to block these things, these all sound like sort of random. Like, how could you block all these possible things that could theoretically happen from attackers? There are countermeasures. You can do electromagnetic shielding to stop those emanation attacks. You can filter wires so that things don't leak out of the wires. You could jam. So if you know that your computer is leaking on a certain frequency, you could jam that frequency with something else, or you could create noise in the computer so that like maybe there's some information leaking out, but you have the computer crunching all the time so that it's just full of random garbage all the time. And then, of course, you can hire penetration testers to actually break your security. And if they're able to break it, then you patch up, you put a Band-Aid over that method they used. You can also encrypt, randomize, stuff like that. But really, this type of analysis, right, it requires defense in depth to protect. You got to use compensating controls like, hey, well, we can't stop that attack, but we could do this to protect. So that you could do overlapping controls. But I know this sounds like a very sophisticated area of security, and it is. But I just pulled this sort of sexy examples of this. There's a lot of sort of simpler versions of side channel attacks that you do need to worry about. Johnathan asked me about, well, what happens if we lock someone out of the system? We fire them, we lock them out. Aren't we safe? Sorry for doxing you here, Johnathan. And I said,
good.
Well, it could be a side channel attack if they hid a device in that office, right? That is then sort of like covertly monitoring everything that's going on in the office, and you think you locked them out, but they've got their own cellular device beaming information home. So anyway, whew. That was the geekiest one of those security essentials we did in a while. Johnathan, do you feel enlightened or informed? How are you feeling?
I feel like James Bond is less fiction than I thought it was.
I didn't even get into the really James Bondy stuff, but yeah, I've heard of planes that can fly over and turn people's cell phones on and then suck the data out remotely.
Wild.
I don't know. I can't for 100% sure say that's happening. But I've heard some things.
So you know where my mind first goes when I hear all of this, Matthew? My mind first goes is like if I'm a small business owner and my MSP comes to me and talks to me about side channel attacks, my thought is I have nothing that has quite the level of value that would require that kind of sophistication. So I don't think I should be worried about a side channel attack. I see that as being a potential objection that an end user might bring up to an MSP if an MSP were to be brave enough to try and articulate this to a customer. What
I would say, if I was the MSP, what I would say to my customer is, okay, here's an example of a side channel attack. This is something we realistically can't protect from. Here's the James Bond story.
Yeah.
We want to build our security, so that's the only thing we have to worry about, and then we want to buy insurance to protect that residual risk, and that's the goal. But currently, right now, it's this easy to break into your system. Right. So let's make it more like that.
It doesn't even require a James Bond level of attack to breach your system right now. You don't even have MFA on.
Yeah, that's exactly where I would go with that.
It's a great response to that.
But us security guys love those sophisticated attacks because they're the fun part of our job to read about spy novels. But yeah, average business doesn't need to worry about it. But you know what you do need to worry about as an average business is security theory in general, right? And so these are sophisticated examples of ways you can break security. But every sophisticated example has this is what's happening in the real world right now. Right. Because let me tell you, some of these things that sound theoretical, like AI robots, like that know your kid's name, calling you up and like saying they're in prison, like are actually happening.
Right. True.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're here to talk about growing your channel with trusted advisors. We just talked about this like deep intellectual exercise you could have with your client. How do we flip that into an advisory type conversation?
I mean, it's going to be kind of a hard shift, I think, but I mean, definitely interesting. Hopefully, you get a referral that you're able to have that kind of intellectual discussion from one of your trusted advisors. So that's about as awkward a segue as I can think of.
Well, all right. So we talked last week about why it's important to be that trusted advisor, and not just a trusted advisor in general, but like for specific things that you're delivering business value for, right? To connect with the value. We talked with even how to position to become that trusted advisor, and I think we were going to save like leveraging. Okay, now that you are the trusted advisor, how do you use that, right?
Yeah, so today is meant to be incredibly practical, and I've written down a few things to make sure that we touch on them, some examples and some practical takeaways for those of you who joined us last week for part one. And if you're here for part two, you know, if you weren't there for part one, this will still be really relevant to you. There was some homework assigned though at the end of part one. There were two things you were supposed to do. Number one, you were supposed to go back and do some soul searching. And who in your world could you identify as a COI, a center of influence? Meaning, just to recap for those of you who are here for the first time, who else has the mind share of your current customer base, right? So if you're an MSP and you provide legal, IT services, let's say in the legal industry or the medical industry, or like you pick a vertical, whatever, right? In that space or that community or that geolocation, who else is a non-competing service provider or solution provider that also has the ear of your customer? And influence is key, because, you know, like the cleaning company that comes into their office and vacuums the floors and cleans the toilets probably isn't going to have influence with that business leader related to how they handle technology and security. Maybe I could be wrong. Maybe that is a COI for your industry. But who else is? So that was your homework. And I know we had a couple people watching. I don't know if there's a place for you to chat or chime in, but I'd love for folks to give some examples. If you don't have examples or we don't get any, I've definitely written some down. That was homework assignment number one. Homework assignment number two came actually from you, Matthew, and you encouraged everyone to spend some time on your IT provider's website, your MSP website, and looking for, you know, so much of what we talked about was trust building. And what does trust even mean in a relationship with a channel advisor or someone that can refer business to you? And why should a CPA or a financial advisor or a lawyer or a business consultant or a network cabling guy, why should he take your word when you say, oh, we do security good? I can tell you what a side channel attack is. Oh, that was what we just talked about. Right. But why should they take your word for it? So Matthew was encouraging you to like, hey, is that readily apparent through customer attestations, through certifications, through reviews, through a demonstration of competency? When people interact with your brand and your messaging and you, they have that confidence from not just the words you say, but look at what we've done, right? So those are two homework assignments from last week. Who in your world could be a center of influence, a COI, and do they have legitimate reason to trust you? All right, so that's what we kind of a good recap of what we did last week and a good recap of kind of some homework for you guys. Is it coming back, Matthew?
Yeah, it's all coming back, and I want to go talk to the trusted advisors in my community now. So you're
Yeah, all right. Like
I'm thinking about accountants, I'm thinking about lawyers, but I'm also thinking about all those people that get up on stage at business events, right? In those specific niche industries like manufacturing, like ERP, right? Like logistics,
right.
like the guy from FedEx that's just super smart about getting stuff in boxes, right? And thinking like there's a security transition at all these points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all right, so we've identified the people and we've maybe positioned our website around like I could be the security guy. Now what?
Well, first, I want to back up just a little bit to give some practical examples. And if you still are like scratching your head, I still don't know who a COI is, or like I thought I knew who a COI was, but I can't seem to get anywhere with them. So you need to figure out what's that other thing apart from the services you provide that if it was gone, your customer would be dead in the water. Like they couldn't function, right? So you meant ERP is a great example, right? The ERP is down in a business, financials don't run, warehouse doesn't run, the manufacturing plant doesn't run, procurement doesn't run, nothing really runs. It's kind of like the motor that's running. Not every business uses an ERP system though. So if you've got a big chunk of your base is manufacturing, logistics, distribution, figuring out who the partner of record is that sold them Sage, Acumatica, Dynamics, NetSuite, Infor, Epicor, whatever, who sold them the license, they very likely also help with the configuration, implementation, and the support of that system. Now, some of you MSPs actually do this. That's part of your world is you actually sell and support ERP, but the large majority of you don't. And if you don't, find out who's doing that for your customer. And you need to become good friends with them because very likely they've got other customers just like your mutual customer. Because very, very rarely does an ERP provider just have like one or two clients. They're going to have kind of a patchwork quilt of manufacturing and logistics folks, probably construction, maybe across their region or whatnot. So that's one example. Another example would be if you got customers who are law firms, right? Figure out what the practice management software is that they're using, right? If you're like, oh, I've never heard of that. Well, then you really need to go talk to your customers because pretty much every law firm is going to use, and any law firm of significance is probably using a practice management software. If you're in healthcare, what EHR or EMR are they using? And where did they get those licenses from? Who helped implement it? Who's helping support it, et cetera, on an ongoing basis? That's a great COI. That's a layup if you've got customers in that spot. I was going to say fleet management software if you've got shipping and logistics people, right? Network cabling guys. I know a lot of you guys have good relationships with those project-oriented technology folks. I just had a conversation last week with a gentleman who's like, yeah, we get asked by our customers all the time if we'll take over the IT management. And we say no because they think it's all the same. They think laying cables and plugging in servers and setting up a data center is the exact same as providing ongoing support. We don't do that. So we like to refer that to MSPs. Those are just a few examples. Once again, you need to do some soul searching. And if you don't know, you have customers, ask them. Like, that's not hard. You get some face time with your top 5 clients that are like rock star customers that if you had 20 more of them next year, it would totally change your business. You really need to get obsessive about who else has influence with my customer, because if you can find that out, you can replicate what you have there across the industry. All right. So I wanted to back up and share that into some practical examples of COIs. If you're not thinking about it, ways to go figure out who they are. And now we want to transition into how you approach them and how you can structure a meaningful relationship with them. So, Matthew, let's use ERP as an example. Let's pretend you run an MSP and you have customers that are in manufacturing and distribution, and you know they are all using ERP systems. Let's say you figure out who is a really great regional resource that's reselling Sage or whatever, and you build a relationship with them. What's your first move? What do you think your first move should be or would be?
Well, I love asking for introductions, firstly. I mean, that's the easiest thing. You can't always get a warm intro, right? Mm-hmm. But most of the time when you ask for an introduction, people are happy to do it. If they're not used to giving introductions, though, you might have to be specific and say, hey, could you actually send an email introducing me to this person today? Mm-hmm. Email today, this person, right? Sometimes you got to say those words. Other times you could just say, hey, can you make an introduction? But the reality is you're not always going to get those introductions because the person may be uncomfortable with the idea of making introductions in general in the world. They may not be used to that. They may forget, right? So then like the follow-up activity is sort of like don't give up, right? There's other ways of getting at those people, but like I don't know how much of the time do you think asking for the intro works? I think like more than half.
I'm a big fan of being incredibly direct, right? So let's assume you've moved past the relationship part. Like you guys have you have a relationship with the COI. A whole other challenge is establishing a relationship. And I do want to touch on that, but just to be able to answer your question better, if you've got the relationship with the COI, ye have not because ye ask not. Like you just literally need to say, hey, is there anyone in your world you'd be willing to introduce me to? Send a mutual introduction email. Now, the easiest thing for that COI to say at that point, and is very likely for them to say, is like, I'm absolutely going to think about that. Let me do some soul searching and figure out who, and let me see if there's anyone in my network I'd be willing to introduce you to. And then what happens next? Crickets. Absolutely nothing happens. I'm sure some of you watching this later, go ahead.
Well, most of the time it's crickets, but you can stay in touch. And at the moment of a client need, right? If you stay in touch, you will get some business in your lap. But like the reality is, if you want them to be your champion, they probably need an incentive, right?
Possibly. I mean, so that's a whole other conversation. I do think it's best practice to incentivize referrals or at least to reward referrals somehow, some way. But I'm here to tell you that most service providers that are in the trenches with their customers who are not you, right? Like a ERP reseller partner, somebody who's helping them with their practice management software, or a network cabling guy, they are less coin operated than you think. They are so consumed with what they're doing in their world, it's already hard enough for them to sell their own services, that for them to sell yours is kind of like, man, if it happens, it happens, right? And if you happen to have a COI who's got an entrepreneurial and a sales mindset, then maybe I could be proven wrong. You show them how, oh yeah, I'll give you 15% of the revenue for life if you find me this guy. And he's doing the math. He's like, oh man, that could be serious coins in my pocket. I'm not saying that that's never going to work, but the reality is the majority of your COIs are so consumed serving their customers and running their businesses that as much as they like you, as much as they would love to send you business, and they genuinely would, it's kind of an afterthought. And you made a good point. It's like, well, when customer need arises because of your relationship, they're going to think of you. And that's true. But I think most IT providers watching this call could attest to that, yeah, that's actually how they've gotten their referrals in the past. Something came up with their customer and they're like, oh man, you need to talk to XYZ IT. That's organically happening for a lot of you already. And that's great. And some of you would say that it's enough, but the majority of you would say, I'm not satisfied with twiddling my thumbs and waiting on my hands for that next moment where their customer has a need. I want to proactively leverage that relationship in a way that can be mutually beneficial and not necessarily always be hoping that the referral comes. So how can you do that? Well, I would go a step further than just asking for the referral. For those centers of influence where you've truly built trust, and trust is so key here. You've got relationship, you have trust. You need to ask for some kind of commitment beyond just think of me when the time is right, please. No. Hey, Mr. Partner, Mr. COI, Mr. Channel Partner, because that's what they are. They're a sales channel for you. Can we meet on a recurring basis just to support each other in our respective markets, in our respective industries, as business leaders, hold each other accountable to goals, and use it as an opportunity for us to get creative and see how we can help each other grow. And so that was like, oh man, you're asking me to be vulnerable and actually involved in this person's life. Yes, I am. And that's going to reap dividends for both of you. So beyond the relationship being much stronger as a result, it's just going to be a proactive rather than a passive motion. And here's where you go, once a month would be great. Now, not everyone's going to be able to commit to once a month. So once a quarter, maybe every other month, however many times in a quarter you can meet with these people. And some of this will be based on the size of their customer portfolio, right? If they've got 5 clients, it might not make sense to do this as often with this particular COI. But let's say you're talking to an ERP reseller and they've got manufacturing companies all across the Southeast or the Northwest or all over the US. They got hundreds of customers. Well, dude, man, you should probably, if they're open to it, meet with them on a recurring basis. So when I was in the ERP space, we worked with those resellers all the time. And I alluded this last week, but we called it 1 hour, no homework. And the reason behind it was, man, we want the referrals, but we don't want to inconvenience or be intrusive or aggressive with our partner. So can we meet once a month? And what we're literally going to do, once you have that trust and relationship, say, hey, will you open your CRM to me? Will you pull up a spreadsheet of your customers with me? And one at a time, and we might only get through 3 to 5 in an hour, and that's okay. We're going to pull up the website of each one of your customers, and you, Mr. ERP reseller, Mr. CPA, Miss legal team, Miss whoever, pull up the website of your customer, and I want you to tell me the story and story is really important because it's a human thing. You ask, what's your relationship with this customer? Do they like you? Are you doing good things for them? Are they happy? Now tell me about what's going well in their world. And now tell me what's their biggest challenges. And you better be asking the business questions on this call with them, not the technical questions on this call, because they don't know your world like you do. They're not IT providers. They're doing whatever it is they do. So you need to be asking business questions, and you need to infer from what they tell you. So yeah, this company is on a rapid pace for growth. They're anticipating being, tripling their headcount this year, and they just got a round of funding and they're opening a new place. Those should be key indicators to you that IT is going to be a major investment for them in the next couple of years or next couple of months. Be like, wow, okay, sounds like the business side is growing. So operations and technology is going to be a critical part of them doing that successfully. Would you agree? 100%. Cool. So that I help with those types of things, right? Yeah, sweet. Would you be willing to introduce me to this customer? And by the way, you don't have to write the email. I've already written it for you. Here's a template. And you can copy, paste it, change the email, change the names and the emails, and hit send, and I'll take it all from there. And I actually, while we were talking earlier, I pulled up an example of this template that I've done for other people. I'm going to change the names as I read it to you. But here's an example of one that I've helped another partner with. So the subject line says mutual introduction, vertical pipe, and then it's the person's name you're getting referred to first, and then some arrows pointing between that name and your name. Now remember, this is your COI, your partner, who's going to send this email to their customer, introducing you to them. So they're saying mutual introduction, Matthew wants you to meet Johnathan. And then here's the body of the email. It's short and sweet. It says, hey, Mr. Customer, I hope you have been well. It occurred to me the other day that I've never introduced you to Johnathan's IT. Johnathan and his team have done incredible things for us, and I know that you guys were anticipating growth next year. So it made a lot of sense to me that you two should know each other. Whether you work together or not, it's really critical you guys add each other to each other's networks. Johnathan's going to reach out to you in the next couple of days to introduce himself. I highly suggest you guys get some time together. Short, sweet, thanks. There's the signature. And you notice I said nothing about sales. I said nothing about IT. I said these guys have just been helping our other customers of ours do incredible things. You two should know each other. Now, if you can get a COI to send 2 or 3 of those to their customers a month, and then you can build a relationship with 5, 6, 10, 20 COIs that can commit to doing that with you, you just got 40 referrals in a quarter. Congratulations, right? Now, what we didn't do is built the relationship and thought that was enough. Now, it might be enough for the obvious ones. Your partner has a customer who had an incident, or they were down for 48 hours because of some network issue or whatever. They're obviously going to think of you in that scenario. But the ones that are less obvious are like, oh, they have a customer who just secured a round of funding and they're anticipating growing. That ERP guy is probably not thinking IT. That financial services guy is probably not thinking IT. So they're not organically going to think I should introduce them to each other. But by you getting FaceTime with the partner and them giving you insight on that 1 hour no homework call, and That's beautiful right there. If you can get your COIs to do that. So that's what we did. 1 hour, no homework. It's a practical thing. Any one of you could start doing with your COIs today. Just ask them, hey, can we connect once a quarter, twice a quarter, once a month, and just do this kind of thing? And here's the thing, you have to also give. So you can't just take. So they're going to ask you to do the same thing. And I would suggest if you want to get something out of it, you'd be willing to do that too. It's like, oh, if it's a CPA, it's like, hey, would you be willing to introduce me to some of your customers? You know, it should be mutual, especially if you want it to work well. All right, I've been preaching, but I'm passionate about it.
I've been doing that for years with in person, right? In physical meet space. You go to a networking event, you meet other business owners, you swap stories, you talk about people you know. Incredibly rewarding and fun, but also super expensive, right? You got to go drive someplace.
Right.
You got to like plan it out in advance, maybe like buy tickets, like get your name on a list, like show up, like you're out of the office for the day. So like whatever you're supposed to be doing is not getting done. I love this short, sweet, recurring. It doesn't cost anything.
If it's a local COI, sure, do it in person. Maybe your first couple should be in person, right? But as you get to that recurring stage, there's no reason this couldn't be a Teams call, Zoom, whatever. In fact, it'll be a little easier if you're literally going to be like pulling up websites and stuff to do it virtually. Or invite them to your office. I don't care. I mean, just do whatever you need to do, whatever makes them comfortable and feel like, yeah, I can trust my partner with these customers of mine. Anyway.
Well, I'm excited to go do that.
Let's go. Let's have some fun. You know,
you should do it live on the air. No.
You know, it's funny you say that because like the only reason you shouldn't do that live on air is because you're going to be literally sharing customer data.
Yeah, no, we can do that there.
I was well, you could do like a mock version, you know.
Yeah.
I tell you what, next time I do one, I should think about having it recorded and then doing like an AI. Or yeah, like record it and then like do like a recreation of it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Whatever. This is good stuff.
So we told part of your story earlier and we really didn't like finish the story. So I want to let's do the ChannelFalcon thing here. So you started Dark Horse, which was this container that you started filling with some consultancy, right? But then you decided to get specific, right? So talk to me about the idea behind ChannelFalcon and like what are the wins looking like? I know that some people that I've been talking to are excited about the work you're doing.
Love it. Yeah, happy to share. It's really relevant to this whole economy of trust idea because there's been a couple iterations of my battle cry. My battle cry is you need to earn the mental real estate of your future customer. Like when it comes to growth as an IT, this is universal in any sales or marketing capacity, business development channel, whatever. It's really relevant in any like growth engine, but especially so for service providers. You must earn the mental real estate of your future customer. And the fastest path to do so is through authentic, physical, human connection. All right. So the reason that ChannelFalcon exists is because we're trying to build an economy of trust between the SMB and mid-market and this incredible channel of service providers that I've been so privileged to get to know over these last few years. So to proactively find opportunities to build the bridge of trust between the channel of service providers and the market that's in need of your services. What I used to do outsourced cold calling for MSPs. And we made thousands of calls with a pretty decent sized team for several different MSPs for a short period of time. And I made some conclusions there. I said, selling IT services is not the same as selling pizzas, shoes, or a SaaS product I can add to cart and check out, right? It's a highly invasive, highly partnership driven managed service. It's called managed services for a reason that people just don't go shopping for. So does cold calling have its place? Certainly. And in fact, we still do that. But the idea is we call ourselves cyber matchmakers. So we still make calls, but rather than represent individual MSPs, we represent a nationwide network of trusted service providers. So when I call a business owner today, I get to say, hey, thanks for taking my call. Before we get started, I'm going to make 3 assumptions. 1, you have IT already. 2, you might have something in place for security, though I don't know what or how you feel about it. 3, based on the industry you're in, I see compliance is relevant to you. I'm not here to tell you to change anything. In fact, you'll never get a bill from me. You'll never be my customer. But the reason for my call, if you are experiencing any discomfort in one of these categories, we can walk you through a complimentary white glove discovery process where we help you understand your business pain, build out your requirements, and prepare a budget if you've never worked with a provider like this before. And then we're going to be your advocate and matchmaker at no cost to you, where we're going to go into our network of trusted providers and match you with exactly who you need. But we won't waste your time if you don't need anything. And we definitely won't waste our partners' time if they can't do what you need. So that's what we're trying to build. That's what ChannelFalcon, we're still in alpha. We've been doing it for a little over a year. We've got about 25 partners in our program today, all over the US. And the way that it works is you pay a subscription to be in our network. But I don't just accept anyone, because that trust piece is so critical. So we're working on a process to, verify you can do the things you say you can, and that you're a legitimately good service provider. But assuming those are true, you pay to be in the program. Then you pay when we find opportunities. We introduce you. You're like, oh man, there's a manufacturing company in Albuquerque with 75 users, and they just fired their on-site IT guy, and they don't know what to do. Oh, would you like to meet them, Matthew of Albuquerque IT? Yes, I would. All right. And then we literally get on a call and do a warm handoff. It's not like you just get an appointment on your calendar or, an email address to call or follow up on. That's us. I don't know if that explained it well or not.
Well, no, I think that's early in my career. It was impressed upon me, and this was, I think, so I was in IT, okay, and from the beginning, like IT guy, born and bred, basically. But as an IT guy, particularly 20 years ago, most of the job opportunities were not with IT companies. They were in companies that used IT, right? And the CEOs were oftentimes scratching their heads, like, why am I spending so much of my business, like, brain dealing with IT? And the result of that over the last 20 years has been, look, all these individual enterprises that are focused around shipping product, building things, like taking care of patients' health. Like, the center of their business is not IT. IT is the thing they need to do to enable their business or save money or whatever.
That's right.
It's a requirement that it makes a lot of sense to outsource. When you outsource, you get a whole team of people that have specialized skills that you couldn't possibly afford. They're more efficient at what they do. They're better at what they do. It's way cheaper than doing it in-house. It's just better all around. And if you flip that around, like, so that's the IT provider like pitch, and I believe it. I think it's true. And if you turn that around and you look at it from the other side, okay, so I'm a technologist. I'm running an IT company, and that's mostly the case, right? There are a few sales guys running around that have formed IT companies knowing nothing about IT, and they can do fine. But most IT service providers are founded by technologists, and they're good at technology, and they're good at hiring technology and overseeing technology, talking about technology, helping customers with technology. They are not experts in lead gen, like finding people that have need, right? And so, this I think we're just the digital world, right? What it's doing to us, it's allowing all of us in the world to focus on the stuff that we do that, like, we're really great at, right? And work with partners where we're not great at things, rather than being collections of departments that aren't good at, like, anything, right? And
yeah, I agree with that very much.
so it makes perfect sense to me, and I really hope that that our partners are thinking about doing these types of things. Bringing in people that are strong where they are weak, right?
Yeah. The last thing I'm going to say on it, though, one thing you said, it's absolutely true. The status quo you described of like most IT companies are built by technologists. That is true. And yes, you do need to identify your strengths and weaknesses and where you're weak. Leverage strategic partners to learn. But what I do is different than a lot of things because I'm here trying to help you grow. But I'm different than a lot of like lead gen or marketing agencies or whatnot that will say, oh, yeah, sign up and the leads will flow and you're going to crush it and get $1 million this year from this endeavor. Like your ROI is going to be off the charts. I actually don't say that. I don't say that at all. I make no promises. In fact, I tell you when you work with us, it's really more as a supplement to taking ownership of your own growth. Yeah. So if you are a technologist first, you need to be working and developing your own business acumen so that you can have those business conversations and learn some skills. Like if you are a business owner, you're in sales, like it or not, you are. And many of you have hired salespeople that didn't work out. And there's reasons for that. Because you have to figure it out first. So yes, leverage strategic partners. Yes. Know where you're strong, where you're weak. You might not want to just pass the buck. Look for folks, and I'd be happy to be one of them. I'd consider it a privilege, but look for folks that can empower you to take ownership of your own growth. And that's really what I'm trying to do for MSPs. And if I bring you opportunities along the way, that's even icing on the cake. So.
Well, thank you, Johnathan. And thank you for making this a two-parter. We'll catch up with you sometime next year to see maybe you're out of alpha and into beta, or out of beta and into general. I think that I've been hearing a lot of this idea that you brought into the channel a year ago, right, has really matured, and I can't wait to see what happens in your journey.
I will neither confirm nor deny how close beta is, but it is closer than it is farther.
So. All right. Next week, we're having Chris Johnson from CompTIA. He's director of cybersecurity compliance programs at CompTIA, including the cybersecurity trust mark. He's going to be visiting with us to talk about CIS 8.1. So most of us IT people are aware of CIS controls, and we've been using CIS version 8 basically since the middle of COVID or early COVID. 8.1 brings with it a few changes, and we're gonna get into it next week. Until then, everyone, enjoy your weekend and your week.
Toodles, y'all.